Hey guys, welcome back to Cocky Gachas, and in this video we're going to do a full analysis on Eversoul's newest unit in town, Honglan, and see whether she did indeed live up to her hype so far. Let's dive right in. So first things first, we're going to touch on Honglan's stats, and as you can see, the max stats, 64k attack right here with the artifact applied, is very typical of a caster in Eversoul. Defense, HP, crit rate, and crit damage are all typical as well as the accuracy of 7. Most casters have 7. I think one of the casters have 8 if I'm not wrong, but Ayame has like a accuracy of 4, which is pretty mediocre, but yeah, Honglan is average here. And then evasion slightly lower. Usually casters would have 10 evasion, but I don't think this is that much of a big deal. And speed wise, of course, we are starting with 100, right? So this is a very typical caster build that we have. The attributes wise, Honglan is looking good on that front. Next, we are going to touch on her skills, and we're going to start with her first sub skill, Ice Dragon. And Ice Dragon deals 120% damage as well as freezing damage for 12 seconds, 60% each tick every 2 seconds, right? So meaning at max this is going to deal 480% damage provided everything goes through and it's not being cleansed off. So freeze is not a stun, it's not a speed debuff, right? It's just a damage over time, just to take note there. And then also this is a 1.5 meter wide straight line to the nearest enemy. You should be able to see the skill on the screen right now. It typically hits 1 to 2 enemies, I would say. Sometimes if you have a taunt like Chloe, it might hit 3 units. Adrian as well might also benefit Honglan, making her hit more units with the Ice Dragon. Next, we have her second sub-skill, Freezing Strike, and for Freezing Strike, this is more of a stunning, disabling CC skill, right? So the damage multiplier, you can see it's quite low, it's 130%. Stun duration is for 3.5 seconds if you were to hit a frozen unit. So this is a CC skill. Next, we're going to touch on her passive skill, which is Blue Dragon's Dignity, and this decreases the speed by 14% of all enemies as long as Honglan is on the field, and also evasion by 21. So this is her main highlight, I think, to a certain extent, although her kit itself is overall very impressive, but this one is what makes her so splashable and so flexible in a lot of teams, because this passive is very valuable. Next, we are going to touch on her main skill, which is Glacier Shower. This does at max 130% burst straight up, and then for her freezing damage itself, it's 65% times 4, which goes up to 260%. Adding the burst, it's 390% provided everything goes through, right? Nothing is being cleansed. And then mana decrease by 2000. So this is a very strong main skill, because like I mentioned previously in my Is She Worth video, this skill is the only main skill that hits all targets. So meaning this deals a lot of damage and applies a mana debuff to all units on the field. Very valuable here. Lastly, we're going to touch on the ultimate skill, Ice Dragon's Howling Fury. And at max level, it's going to deal 200% damage as well as freezing damage for 4 ticks of 70%, totaling up to 480% provided they are not cleansed as usual. Mana decrease is also up to 2500, and additionally, it stuns the enemies for 2 seconds. So this is very similar to her main skill in that it hits all the targets, it decreases mana, but on top of it, it stuns. And just to look at the multipliers, 480%, to be honest, is not that high when it comes to a ultimate skill. But if you consider everything that this ultimate does, it's a very all-in-one kind of a kit, and I think it's very useful and definitely worthwhile to use her ultimate. Now, aside from her skills, we can't forget about her artifact, and her artifact skill, Absolute Guidance here, restores 200 additional mana when using Ice Dragon or Freezing Strike, and also deals additional 70% of the damage or attack on frozen target. So just judging it based on Legendary Plus, we have 500 mana as well as 110% additional damage. And something very interesting here is also that usually people or the units itself would have their picks at Legendary Plus and then subsequently will be at Origin. But interestingly here at Eternal, there is an additional effect whereby the Ice Dragon or Freezing Strike both reduces the target's mana by 200. So this is quite interesting compared to other artifacts. One thing to note, previously it was Data Mine, right? There is only the effect on Ice Dragon, but now it has been reviewed to be Ice Dragon or Freezing Strike. Although the multipliers have been reduced slightly, I think this is actually a buff, given that she generates a lot more mana now with her artifact skill. Next, we're going to take a look at Honglan's skills rotation, because aside from looking at her skills on a face value, we need to see how it is in battle so that we can understand whether her skills are truly effective. So right here we have on screen, you should be able to tell that this is the skill rotation of Honglan is being laid out for you. So what she does is when she enters the battlefield, she's going to use a normal attack and then go straight into her Ice Dragon. Subsequently, it's going to be one more normal attack before she uses her second skill, which is the Ice Pillar. Then she's going to go through a rotation of 3 normal attacks before rotating back to Ice Dragon, and then subsequently 1 normal attack going to Ice Pillar. So it loops on and on. So what we can tell from her rotation itself is that Ice Dragon as well as Ice Pillar are very closely knit to each other, meaning that the effect of Ice Pillar is oftentimes going to be on a frozen target, given that Ice Dragon targets the nearest enemy and also applies the freeze on that enemy, and then shortly after, with only a 1 normal attack gap, she's going to use Ice Pillar. So in all cases, or in most cases, the cleanse has to happen in between this gap itself, this 1 normal attack gap. Otherwise, Ice Pillar is going to definitely hit on the target and apply the stun. So this kit overall, from what I've seen, is very, very effective. Next, we're going to touch on Honglan's mana generation, or what we consider how much time it takes for her to generate enough mana for her to cast her main skill. And for comparisons, we are going to compare her to Menfi, which is another caster. So I put them both on the same team and without any speed sets on either of this units. So this is truly just a normal base speed test. And also, we have 2 scenarios. First scenario, I've used them with a VV, and also I've used them without VV. So 2 scenarios here. So first, you're going to take a look at when we use them without VV. So just with the Menfi as well as Honglan on the team itself, this is against Dwargate's Knife, if I'm not wrong. I also made sure that none of the units are being killed off, because when you kill off enemy units, you generate mana. So I don't want that to sway the results of this test itself, but it's quite evident that you will see Honglan's generation is slower compared to Menfi's. And also in the second test, whereby we have the VV on the team, once again it's the same result regardless of VV's buff. Menfi still is able to reach her max mana first and able to cast her main skill first before Honglan. And the reason for this is because they have different attack animations, and Honglan's normal attack animation is slightly longer than Menfi's, which results in her generating mana a bit slower. So how do I know that? I've tested both of them. I took the first frame in which they move from their starting positions, right? So I start with the same first frame, and then in the clip you are seeing Menfi is able to reach her sub-skills first, which means that her normal attack animation is shorter compared to Honglan. So Honglan's, when compared to a lot of the other units that I've tested, also her normal attack animation is slightly slower. So this is something that I've observed with Honglan and one of her downfalls, so to speak. Now, with all the base information aside, I think this is what you guys are most interested in, right? How do you team build around Honglan? But just a disclaimer, this is just my personal take on the teams itself from what I've tested, but it might not apply to your exact account based on your ascensions. Your results might differ, so definitely take it with a pinch of salt. But with that said, I'm going to first recommend the most generic team that is going to work from generic general battlefront, general stages, gates itself, except for Beast Gate, right? So there's the 4 fairy plus 1 Honglan. So this one is quite straightforward, and it retains the trio that is super useful in terms of Honglan usage, which is Vivi, Talia, and Honglan. So this trio is super broken because Vivi helps to speed up the team, and especially Honglan, meaning that she's able to use her main skill further more times, right? So she's able to reduce the mana of the opponent's team even more effectively, and potentially keep the whole battle, right, without them casting a single main skill. So that is very broken. Talia also helps to exacerbate the situation, right, because she helps with mana regeneration. So mana battery plus speed battery, and then speed going with Honglan itself. This trio is super broken. Chloe is an insane tank. And then next we also have the Naya inside, right, so that you can provide the 20% HP and attack ratio buffs. So this is what I consider a very good team. And then also variation is that you might have something like this. So it's a Catherine in place of the Naya. You lose 10% attack and HP, but sometimes, honestly, that 10% attack and HP cannot help you survive against some of the stages that you encounter in Battlefront. That's when you have to put in the Catherine. So you still retain the 10% buff, and you still have this trio as well as having this Catherine, which is very, very good for climbing or pushing Battlefront, right? So this is the first team, and in fact, I would say that this is like my favorite team alongside the 4 fairies, 1 Honglan. Next, we have the 4 humans Honglan team. So 4 humans Honglan team, quite self-explanatory, right? It's just basically supping in with 4 humans. So we have this Memphi plus where's Memphi? Memphi plus this. So this one can change a bit. So this one is what I would consider more like a cookie cutter, but because the reason why we don't have Catherine here is because she doesn't really synergize well with Claire, so you don't really need Claire. By the way, formation itself is subject to change, right? I'm not going to recommend exact formations. You guys can test it out yourself. So what this does is that you have Honglan as the AoE DPSer, and then you have Lindsay as the single target DPS, which helps to pick off those units that are being lowered in HP by Honglan. Very, very effective. Memphi here provides extra DPS. If you really need more healing, or if your Lindsay is not able to survive, feel free to change out Memphi for Catherine, and then this would be a more sustained kind of a build whereby you have Jiho and Catherine sustaining. Hope that Claire survives. Honestly, if Claire survives, Honglan can do a lot of damage, right? You can even make Lindsay your main DPS if Honglan is your support. Doesn't really matter, but I would prefer Honglan as the DPS here because the AoE is really insane. And then next, we are also going to touch on something different, which is a undead team, right? So a lot of people would have recently drawn Velna, so they might have Honglan as a support. So how do you leverage, or how do you take advantage of that? So what I recommend for this itself is something like a 4 undead. So we have Prim as well as where's Petra? Oh, Petra, Prim. Where's Jacqueline? Yeah, Jacqueline. So this is a 4 undead 1 Honglan team. So you can notice that I tend to lean towards 4+1 instead of 3+2 because honestly the beasts are not very good right now. It's very hard for me to pick a beast to put inside. You can say that Clara is a decent healer. That's really subjective, right? But I do think that Prim is a better healer compared to Clara, so I would prefer like 4+1 in this way. If you really want to make it different, you can sub out Prim and then you can put in this. Still have a 10%, so same like a fairy situation. And this is also for generic Battlefront with Velana being the carry here. And yeah, of course Petra is tanking, right? So something like this. Then also lastly, for people that have Ayame, you can try something different. Like you can really play a rainbow team, right? So if you have Ayame, unfortunately I do not have. I'm going to use Adrian to substitute Ayame. You can do something like this. So this retains the best of Honglan as well as also help the Honglan speed up with Vivi, and because you have 5 souls of different types, you're going to be able to have a racial buff, right? Instead of just having no racial buffs, Catherine helps to sustain Velana, and then Ayame, Vivi, and Honglan supports the Velana. So this is with Velana being a sub of like a tank versus DPS, right? So with this itself, I think Velana should be able to survive. Some stages she cannot survive, so I wouldn't recommend this team for the stages that are more towards opponents having very strong DPS units. So depending on that, you might need to switch out and go back to 4+1. That's really subjective. Right, next, we are going to touch on gates, right? So personally, I have pushed my gates to 95 with just this Honglan itself. And you can see this is the team that I generally run with. Some people might ask me, how come I don't run Mika and Siha? The reason is because they are not on my level sync, but also my Ira as well as Clara is decently ascended, and I don't think that Mika Siha can replace Suni Haru. So if I were to like, if I need I really do need a tank, right? So Honglan is all about having a tank to support her. So the reason why I can only push to 95 is also because my Suni is only at epic, and I really can't sustain. So that's the main problem. But if you were to replace them with Mika Siha like this, yeah, you don't have a tank here, so you run into problems. So if you really want to include Mika Siha, I would suggest just removing Ira as well as Clara, going with Suni and Haru, because Haru is really strong. 24% attack or 30% attack for all your units is quite insane if you think about it. So, and her Pack Hunter is always going to be activated, given that all these beast units are always, or at least as of now, they're all tending towards the melee side. And you might ask, hey, how come I don't include Flynn? Because I personally don't really use Flynn, and I don't think she's needed if you have Honglan as your main DPS. So if you guys don't have Honglan as your main DPS, then maybe you have to include Flynn, I think. So you have to include probably Flynn on, preferably on the other side, right? Because you know that Flynn's effect, you need her to be apart from other people. So maybe something like this would be good. So yeah, this is what I recommend for Beastgate. So these are the main teams that I can see that you can build around with Honglan in mind. So now we're just going to have a showcase live on the Honglan team against stage 213, because here there is a prim that I really want to showcase also. But do take note that here I'm using Honglan as my main DPS. I'm going to use her ultimate, and also I only have her artifact at Epic Plus. If you have her artifact at Legendary Plus, it's going to be even more effective. And this here, right, is a good showcase because this 4+1 fairy that I'm going to demonstrate to you guys is a reason. The reason why I think it's so strong is because against teams such as having Prim, right, they are almost not going to have a chance to cast their ulti if you manage to kill one of the units in between the battle, right? So look at this right here. We're definitely going to kill the Rene. So Rene is going to die. I'm going to gain extra. Like mana, and also the good thing is that Petra here is reduced to half HP. So Petra is trying to regain back, but guess what? Her teammates are all dying off very, very rapidly. And meanwhile, we are almost going to hit the second ultimate, and here we're going to minus the Prim's mana again. And do take note, I'm not playing optimally here. If I want to like really try hard here, right, I would try to cancel the animations, but I do know that most of you guys are not adept at cancelling animations, so I'm not going to showcase that part. But do take note that especially for Honglan herself, cancelling animations is going to be super huge. And if I would have cancelled the animations, I don't think Prim would have gotten even that main skill off. A lot of times Prim doesn't even get her main skill off before I kill off the entire team, and that is because if you can cancel the animations very, very perfectly, right, you can like override the disadvantage of Honglan having a very long normal attack like animation, and then going into her sub skills more often. And by going to her sub skill more often, she's going to gain more mana through her artifact, and based on that, you're going to have an easier time on generating mana to use her main skill again, which is something like this. So this is a good stage to see. The DPS side, Honglan does a lot of DPS, honestly. So here she does 3.5 million, and this is in cases where there is a healer such as Prim. If there are no healers, she's going to do less damage because they are going to die faster. So yeah, this is only with a level 203 Honglan, simply because I wanted to make the rest of the units 180. Optimally, you can also make the rest like 160 and then just pump all the stats into Honglan to make her even higher level. Right now, I'm sure there's another question that you guys have on your mind, and that is what a lot of people talk about, right? Is Honglan a DPS or a support? A lot of people have called Honglan a sub DPS, and that is because her ultimate skill doesn't have that high of a multiplier. But I do view the concept of DPS slightly different. I do think that DPS is only required as much as you need to clear the route. So the only problems that Honglan would really have as a DPS when it comes to rounds is where there's a single target left, like a Claire, maybe like Catherine plus Claire, 2 units, and then they constantly heal each other. But I think that problem itself is going to require you to have a separate DPS, right, to come in and substantiate Honglan. However, as a main DPS, very, very easily, I think, using her ultimate, you can still do a lot of DPS, and I do not agree with a lot of people's take that she is supposed to be a sub DPS, she's not supposed to be a main DPS. I think she can be a main DPS if you really ascend her, and in fact, my Honglan is not very strong, so if I can make her even stronger with the Legendary plus artifact, I think she's going to be even more effective, because her main skill does a lot of DPS. So if you were to have a high artifact, you can cycle your main skill faster, you can do a lot more DPS compared to what I have right now, which is not the best Honglan demonstration, I think. So even then, I feel like she's more than enough to do good DPS. Some stages, if you have the Manon pack, I think you can switch up, like go between Talia as well as her in the 4+1 formation. You can go between Vivi ulti, you can go between Naya ulti, but personally, I only swap between Talia as well as Honglan. I think Honglan for most stages is going to be more than enough, and if you use her on the Beastgate, you will know how beastly of a DPS she is. But this is just my opinion. You are free to disagree, right? You can use her in whichever way you want. I think that ascending her has been a great choice for me, and I do recommend people that have the ability to pull for her 300 pulls to use her as a DPS as well. Test it out for yourself, right? The mana reduction can help you clear a lot of stages while not doing the like crazy multipliers DPS, right? If there's no need for you to burst down the units right away, the ticks can like really build up, and then you can also prevent them from using their main skills, which means that you are able to sustain better in a lot of stages as well, and providing a lot of DPS at the same time. In summary, I think that Honglan is a really good unit. I think that goes without saying. I know most people know that Honglan is a good unit by now. Her pros are that she does a lot of AoE damage, so if you pair her up with other AoE dealers, she's going to be very strong. Her minus mana, right, the mana manipulation aspect of her kit is insane. A lot of times you can effectively make the opponents not even cast their skills itself before you delete their teams, right? So that aspect is a strong, like a very strong boon for Honglan, and also her passive is very good, so whether you want to use her as a support or DPS, her passive is still relevant. Of course, as any unit, there are also some cons, right? Although I don't think they're that huge when it comes to Honglan. Her attack speed is relatively slower, as you can see in my demonstration, right? She generates mana a bit slower, so it's better to pair up with Vivi, but even then, if you were to just wait till they use their first set of skills, right? So, for instance, if there's a Talia, you can wait for her to use her main skill first. There's a Prim, you can wait for her to use her main skill first, then subsequently, the second set of their skills is not going to come out that easily with your minus mana like kit for Honglan, and of course with the minus speed, it's also going to make them have a harder time to come up with their main skills. The next thing that I didn't think would be that much of a problem, but in fact it is quite a problem, is that she's a beast. Honestly, it's quite hard to make her like work with 3+2 at the moment, because Beast faction isn't that good. So 4+1 is really the thing I would recommend most of the time, and that also means that if you were to like sub in the Catherine into the fairy squad per se, you're going to lose 10% attack and HP. Is that worth it? That you have to really like debate within yourself, right? See whether it's going to work for the stage itself. But being a beast faction is going to hamper her a lot until they introduce further beast units. So looking forward to other beast units that's going to come to Eversoul that can make Honglan even more OP. And that does it for this video. Hope that you guys enjoyed the analysis and took something away, right? Also, if you're interested in seeing how your luck for pulling Honglan, because I know that when you're watching Honglan, you're probably going to pull for Honglan. You want to compare your luck to mine, definitely check out this video of my stream highlights. I edited the whole thing, and you can take a look at how my luck compares to yours. I'll see you guys over there. This is Corky Gachas, signing off.